started. We were just getting the live stream up and running. So I would entertain a motion to reconvene an open session. Moved by Carl, seconded by Karen. All those in favor? That is carried. We acknowledge that the land on which we gather today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Neutral people. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements and their contributions to our community. We offer this acknowledgement as an act of reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples of Canada. Colleagues, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, we are going to defer the item 7, the award recognition, till next month so the recipient can be with us. And I'm going to move to consent agenda items and ask, are there any items anyone would like in the consent agenda move to the regular part of the agenda? That is items 8.1 to 8.12. I see nobody indicating that, so could I have a mover and a seconder to move the consent agenda items? Moved by Tony, seconded by Rosita. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Is there any business arising from the minutes? I see none. So we have correspondence, and the items under the correspondence were included in the package for the board's information. Chief, I don't know if you want to highlight any or if any board member does. We've all had time to read them. Okay, seeing none. Police Services Board report, procedural bylaw. This is attached on page 95, and Jill's going to speak to this.
Thanks, Chair Redmond, members of the board. So I'm bringing this item back again to the board this month. So as noted in the report, our current procedural bylaw was reviewed and updated. The updated draft bylaw was provided to the board for review and comment at your July board meeting. That version provided in July was tracked and highlighted all the proposed changes to the bylaw. So I won't go through all the changes again, but note that at that meeting, there was no requested edits from the board. So the final draft has been cleaned up and formatted and is included in your board package for your review and approval. Based on the draft bylaw, just a couple quick things to note. The contents of 2 board policies have been incorporated into the draft bylaw, and it's being recommended that these policies be archived, and that's included in the motion that's before you today. So that's the use of consent agenda policy and the closed meetings of the board policy. And just a reminder that there's a number of sections in the draft bylaw that when we brought it in July were flagged that will require review and likely some amendments once the new Community Safety and Policing Act is proclaimed. So if there's any questions.
Thank you very much, Jill. I see no questions, so I would take a motion to approve the procedural bylaw. If I could have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Karen, seconded by Sandy. All those in favor? Thank you very much. And Jill, thank you for staying on top of that. That's really important. The next agenda item is the board budget. We will require a motion to approve the operating expenses for 2022 in the amount of $133,800, and Jill is going to speak to this as well.
Thank you, Chair Redmond. Members of the board. So each year the board sets its budget for operating expenses. So the proposed budget for 2022 is in your package. The attached budget was developed following a review of actual expenses for 2018 to 2020, as well as expenses incurred to date in our current fiscal year. So the proposed budget of $133,800 represents only a $500 increase from this year's budget, the current budget 2021, and that $500 increase is under the membership account. And those costs billed to that account are set by provincial and national associations. So the 2022 budgeted amount is just based on this year's costs and what we expect the increase to be in 2022. So a minimal increase for proposed for 2022.
So I see no, oh, Karen, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for this. I can't remember what we've seen in the past, but is it possible in the future when we see this to actually see actuals? Because like we're seeing sort of budget numbers for two amounts, but I have no sense of if we're just budgeting, if I'm making this up. So for legal fees, or let's say consulting fees for $20,000, I don't know how much of that, we normally spend in a fiscal year. So it would have been helpful to have even 2020 numbers, just to match it against what we're being asked to approve for a budget, for next year, because it's just hard to know.
Yep, absolutely. I can add that going forward. And I can certainly provide that as well after the meeting if it'd be helpful.
I would appreciate that, because I mean, we're 2021, I would imagine, and I could be wrong, is a bit of a blip in terms of outlier year. So for example, meetings or other travel or conferences, I don't know how much perhaps is normally allocated there as opposed to what we're doing because we're into virtual meetings and stuff like that for COVID. So I would find it helpful, particularly for some of these line items that are bigger line items, just as we always continue to try and find efficiencies in terms of what we're doing. It would just be helpful to compare it against actuals.
Yep, absolutely. I can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Could I have a mover then and a seconder for this approval of the budget? Moved by Carl, seconded by Rosita. All those in favor? Thank you. That is carried. Next agenda item is Police Services Board report. Oh, sorry, we did that. Chief of Police reports. Over to you, Chief.
Good morning, Chair Redmond and members of the board, and happy September. And what a sense of optimism as we head into the last quarter of 2021, which is hard to imagine. We have a series of actually 9 Chief of Police reports, so we'll move through these to keep the meeting moving forward. The first one relates to the WRPS 2021 second quarter impact. And I'm pleased to welcome Staff Superintendent John Goodman, who oversees our neighborhood policing division and does a significant amount of liaison and outreach with our healthcare system, as well as with the Canadian Mental Health Association. So I'll turn it over to Staff Superintendent John Goodman. John, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Chief. Good morning, everyone. I hope you had a great summer. Nice to see you all again. I have Amanda Franceschini with me today as well. So Amanda, if you could come on with me, that'd be great. So this is our second quarter report for the impact team. As you're all aware, we currently have 11 members who work 7 days a week from 8 a.m. to 12 a.m. Out of our urban divisions. And I'm going to have Amanda at this point then take you through our data for the second quarter.
Good morning. Happy to provide a highlight of the impact statistics. We've been collecting this data for a few years now and able to identify some trends and make some comparisons. So for the April, May, June timeframe of this year, the impact team was dispatched 364 times. This is 42% higher than last quarter and much higher than the same timeframe last year, largely affected by the provincial pandemic response. In terms of the volume by day of week and hour of day, there's some trends where we see a little higher volume between Sundays and Thursdays and between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m., though there is demand across most time blocks and each day. Additionally, we're able to track what the most frequent calls for service are that our impact team is dispatched to. The same 4 tend to appear every quarter. We have mentally ill calls that are consistently ranked as the highest type of call impact is dispatched to, although attempt suicides, compassionate to locate, and domestic other calls also round out the most frequent. In terms of subtypes, we can break it down even further and identify that there are 5 other impact calls dispatch attend more specifically within the mentally ill, compassionate to locate, attempt suicide, and domestic other categories. Now, focusing on the top two call types and compared to the WRPS region-wide neighborhood policing statistical reports, we can see that impact has attended approximately 13% of all of the WRPS attempt suicide calls. This is a higher proportion compared to last quarter and a higher proportion compared to the same time frame last year. Also, the impact team attended 16% of all WRPS mentally ill calls. Again, a higher proportion than last quarter and a higher proportion than the same time last year. We also track when the impact team is not available. However, we have some improved availability. So they were requested but unavailable approximately 13% of the time, which represents 54 times between April and June. However, this is a better percentage of availability compared to last quarter and better than the same quarter last year. In terms of not available trends by volume, day of week, hour of day, it slightly matches the volume demand. There's fewer trends, not as much to highlight there. And the most frequent calls that they are not available for matches the amount and types of calls that they do attend. So similar trends, but not a big highlight there. The theme being there was better availability overall this quarter and compared to last year. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, John. John, if you have any concluding remarks, are there any questions from the board? Sandy.
Thanks. Thanks for the presentation. Can you just remind us where the funding for our impact partners comes from?
Thanks very much, Mayor Shantz. The funding actually comes through Ontario Health. And so it's actually flowed from the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Solicitor General to Ontario Health, to the Western region, and then is flowed through the Canadian Mental Health Association. And in particular for us, it's flowed through Waterloo Wellington CMHA. And so we did receive an additional $250,000 for 2021. And Minister Jones has just released an opportunity to augment that for the next year end. There's some available monies provincially that we're looking at internally as we roll through. And this is a sort of a rolling cycle. We have a 3-year memorandum of understanding of a funding agreement that would take us through to the end of 2022 into the fiscal year of 2023.
And if I can ask again, what kind of support, maybe you can't answer this, but what kind of support would we need in order to have closer to 100% availability when we call for them?
Yeah, no, certainly one of the larger discussions provincially is around, increased inadequate funding. We do have an upcoming meeting actually with CMHA, which is an ongoing liaison and partnership to discuss how do we enhance, how do we triage, how do we do business differently. And so, our service is probably unique in the sense that we recognize that, 24/7 availability is not necessarily realistic, and it's also not necessarily needed. You can see that the data analysis that Amanda does is very focused on time, day, and how do we actually ensure that the resources are available at the right time so that we use the best amount of funding that we have. So it's, as we continue these dialogue and discussions, one of the pieces that we're very interested in, we're currently exploring, is a triaging model that is tied to our communication to the PSAP on behalf of the Regional Waterloo, which would actually even look at diverting mental health calls from actually any police response. It would actually transition and push to the healthcare system directly. As a service, we've also requested that we look at the legislative change required under the Mental Health Act, which would allow others to apprehend, including our paramedic colleagues who do a lot of tiered response on these calls for service. So we're always looking at ways. I don't necessarily always see this as pushing more funding into the system. I think it's how do we use the funding within the system to be the most efficient, effective, and quite frankly, best for the individual that requires the healthcare need. And so those are ongoing discussions. And This is a new reporting mechanism that we're sharing with the board to raise the awareness of the actual demands, not only on policing, but on the healthcare system. I don't think we can always look at this in isolation. We have to have dialogues with our healthcare partners around what do they require and what do they need. So, we do believe that, our current level of service has much improved and much enhanced with availability and enhanced funding. And that will be sort of the larger discussion we have in the ongoing with CMHA, but also provincially, because, I want to reinforce this is a provincial responsibility around mental health and mental health care, not a regional municipality issue. It's not a police board issue, although there is a natural intersection of the police service being involved in certain calls that require police intervention. So stay tuned for more on that, Mayor Shantz.
Thank you. If I could have just one more question, can you just speak, and we've talked about this before, but can you speak again to, is this a unique program? And how, yeah, I guess that's it. Is this a unique program? And how are we moving forward with it, I guess?
Yeah, Impact was a unique program. I would say that, it's grown in variations across the province. If you look at Hamilton, the police service, they have a unique program, which is integration and paired connections. And that's been around for a long time, similar to Halton Regional Police. Toronto has a similar integrated model. Our model is slightly different. Of course, the Police Services Board does provide CMHA members, our occupational clinicians, free in gratuity resources, for example, office space and space within our buildings, a police mobile radio, et cetera. So there's an investment from the police service and the board as well. But the way we operate in Guelph and Wellington, as well as Wellington County OPP, Guelph Police Service and Waterloo Region, our program is somewhat unique. Other services have replicated. Waterloo Region was the first pilot of this back in 2013. It has significantly grown. It's significantly advanced. Its success rate is very much, when you look at referrals, et cetera, is very on point, largely thanks to the leadership of CMHA and the executive director, Ms. Helen Fishburne, who continues to work very collaboratively and in partnership with the police service. But I think with any program, we're 8 years into this. There has been evolution. There has been change. We want to look at the integration of triaging through our PSAP, our public service answering point, to look at how do we manage those calls for service? How do we divert? Very shortly, the board will see a diversion piece that we're doing around the criminal justice system. There's always efficiencies, and I think we can never lose sight of how do we best serve the client. So there was a uniqueness. It's now been replicated. It's also been changed slightly or modified, which suits the different regions. But I think locally, the work that Staff Superintendent Goodman and Inspector Houston have been doing is really around how do we actually advance a modernize to meet the needs of the current demand in our region, but also future demands. So some great work being done by John and Beth and team, and in partnership with the CMHA.
Thank you for that, and thanks for looking for new ways to collaborate with the community.
Great question. And I think that Chief also answered what I was sort of hearing embedded in your question, which was how is Waterloo Regional Police Services doing vis-a-vis other services? So great. Any further questions? Seeing none, John and Amanda, thank you and your team for this great work. And the next agenda item is Precharge Diversion Program. And Chief, over to you.
Thanks so much. Very pleased to welcome Inspector Deb McBride from our Investigative Services Division. This is a sort of an item that very much excites myself in the sense that when you talk about innovation and leading, we're doing some amazing work. So I'll turn it over to Deb to take you through this, but this is a unique partnership. It's a pilot project with the Attorney General and some great work done by our Inspector McBride, as well as our information technology, to develop our in-house Precharge Diversion app, with a huge shout out to the John Howard Society Executive Director Joan Nandel for her support, her willingness to engage with our police service, a long history of relationships. And on this one, I'll just, before Deb kicks off, I think the board should take great pride We are leading the province in pre-charge diversion, which signifies our consistent commitment over the last almost 50 years of policing to doing business differently in our community. So welcome, Inspector Deb McBride, and look forward to hearing the excitement. Over to you, Deb.
Thanks, Chief. You know, I'm very excited about this project. Chair and members of the Police Service Board, thank you for allowing me to present to you today. So as the Chief led off, this is the pre-charge diversion program. So it's a direct accountability program, is an alternative to prosecution and a way to remove eligible offenses from the formal judicious process. Pre-charge diversion allows lower thresholds, lower risk offenses to be dealt with through the community-based sanctions to hold the accused person accountable to make amends for their offending behavior. In 2020, almost 13,000 charges were diverted by the Crown Attorney's Office post-charge. The Ministry of Attorney General recently agreed to fund the costing of an adult pre-charge diversion program. And as such, our service, in partnership with the John Howard Society, Waterloo, Wellington, developed a pre-charge diversion process. This process allows the officers to directly divert offenders pre-charge to the John Howard Society, who will facilitate the pre-charge diversion program. To streamline our pre-charge diversion program, our service has created an application, I call it the app, that allows officers to access through their service cell phones, as well as any computer within our police service. During the investigation, the officers are able to make a referral directly to John Howard Society, who receives referral instantly. For example, they'd be able to take their work cell phone right into, I could say, a shoplifter, right into the office where they're dealing with the offender, and they'd be able to make the referral instantly from that location. To be eligible for pre-charge diversion, the offender must accept responsibility for the offense at the time while they're speaking with the officer. They must also agree to the pre-charge diversion program and show a willingness to make amends and receive education or other supports that might have contributed to why they committed the offense. The most common eligible offenses that will be diverted is theft under or theft over, possession under, possession over, mischief under, mischief over, fraud under or fraud over, take motor vehicle without owner consent, causing a disturbance, food, travel, accommodation fraud, uttering forged documents, possession of identity documents, administration of justice, and assault, providing it's a very low level with no injuries. Of note, the offenses that can never be diverted are intimate partner violent offenses, hate motivated offenses, criminal harassment, aggravated assault, impaired driving, firearms offenses, publication of intimate images without consent, child abuse or child luring, robbery, sexual offenses, and voyeurism. As the Chief referred to, the creation of this app has caught a lot of attention across the province. In fact, I actually have a meeting with 5 other services this afternoon after this today to show them our application. So what I wanted to do now was just do a quick share my screen and show you the live format of what the officers will see when they're doing this. So Chief, if you can confirm that it is showing the pre-charge, awesome, thank you. So this is what it looks like when they pull it up on their cell phone. This is the actual app. It shows up the same way on our computers here at work, which is how I'm demoing for you. So they would hit new referral. This part here is taken out of John Howard Society's original forms that we used to have to email them or scan or fax it over to them. So these are the things that the officer will then read out to the offender at that time. And this is where they're agreeing to the program. So the officer will confirm this. And then this is where they go up and they enter in the offender's name, our occurrence number for our report system. I've made this in that it can be an adult or youth diversion program because John Howard Society does both of them for our area here. And then their date of birth, their address, phone number, an email address. This question here is, can program leave a message? So this is asking if John Howard Society can call and leave a message on their voicemail in case they don't want someone else to hear that voicemail. So we're asking permission for that. And then the offenses, we've created a drop down that has all of those offenses that I read out to you that are eligible. And then an incident summary here just lays out whether it was a shoplifter and lays out the incident itself, the details, so that they know what has occurred. the value of goods. So that's in case the person's going to pay back something, whether the items are recovered or not, whether they have a prior record. If they do, then the details of that would be entered in there, and whether they've been diverted before or not. Identified issues. This section here is, let's say that there's a reason why someone has stolen food. So something like, I would expect the officer to put in there that these people are struggling financially and are having issues with being able to feed their family, would be an example of identified issues that they could put in there, which then just helps John Howard Society to understand what type of, help that they can offer to these people. So at the end of this, they literally hit submit referral, and this causes an email to go directly to John Howard Society, and it will have the officer's email return address on there, so then that the caseworker could talk directly back and forth with the officer. And at the end of it, they will update the officer on whether they were successful or not. And if the person is not successful, then the officer would have to make the decision on whether they were going to proceed with charges or not. So that is basically how the app works. And I'm certainly open to any questions if the chief or anybody else has them.
Thanks very much. It's easy to see why you're excited about it. This is streamlining that, must have felt very futuristic even a few years ago. Rosita.
Thank you for the presentation. It's exciting. I just want to know if it's a repeat offender, then what do you do? Like, do you keep referring to John Howard Society, or you will have another step? I noticed on your screen you have a prior record or something. So like, how do you deal with it with a repeat offender?
Chief, would you like me to answer that?
Oh, go ahead, Deb. Yeah, please do.
Certainly. Yeah. So in conversations with the Ministry of Attorney General, we brought that up because it was like, how many times are you willing to refer? So they were very open to the fact of the officers in John Howard Society having a say in that. So depending on the reasons as to why they're reoffending, they were open to us sending them back in for more help. Because if it's someone who's struggling financially and we still haven't given them the right resources that they need to be able to, help their family, then putting them back into court didn't seem to be the right way to deal with it. So it would be a discretion piece at that point in time as to why the offense is reoccurring.
So is there a time when you say, okay, we'll press charges instead of referral then? Like, it's a case by case basis, right? I assume.
Yes, it's very much case by case in individuals for decisions to be made.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Well, Inspector McBride, thank you very much for that. It's exciting. So if this is a pilot, when does it end? When will assessment be made of this?
Go ahead, Deb.
We have fully launched across our service here now, so it has gone live through our entire region. And I am part of the assessment process here, and I've been providing updates with the chief and Deputy Hilton on the progress of this. So the actual end date of the pilot, I believe my recommendations will be going that this is no longer on pilot and that we're forging ahead and this will be the way it is dealt with. But I defer to the chief on that decision.
Yeah, I think Chair Redmond, it's a fair assessment. What we're really piloting is the pre-charge piece and the actual use of the smartphone technology, which is tied to our modernization project. Historically, we've always had diversion and we've always supported diversion, but it had to go through the judicial system. And so we've been working collaboratively with Ms. Patricia Moore, our Crown Attorney, again, also with our Deputy Attorney General, Ms. Susan Kyle, around actually this pre-charge piece, which actually from an efficiency perspective, is very effective, not only for the police service, but also for our Attorney General, our Crown's office around actually flow. And Ms. C, to your point, there is a fail safe that if the individual fails to participate in the actual process, the officer is notified electronically, and then the officer advances judicial charges and says, we gave you the opportunity. I think this is really unique because it actually speaks to the foundation of who we are as a police service. It speaks to the foundations that we're committed to the social determinants of health. We know that we need to actually open doors, provide support, and that the judicial system isn't always necessarily the answer to all of our challenges we're facing as a community. And so at times, diversion is an appropriate piece. So what we're really piloting is this smartphone technology, the Precharge piece. And I guess the end result that we'll do is actually connect, number one, with our partners. Is this working for the John Howard Society? Is this working for the Crown Attorney's Office? And number three, our internal client, is this working for our individuals, and then also the voice of those that we deal with. So is this a valuable tool for the individual we intersect with? So I'm very proud of the work of Inspector McBride and our information technology team. And again, special thanks to the Attorney General for their support, as well as resources to launch this pilot project, which is the technological perspective.
Thank you very much. This is very exciting. When I've conversed and consulted and talked with people who were involved in Black Lives Matter, racialized people, and Indigenous people, they often refer to these kind of programs as something that really will help those sectors of our population who may, for economic reasons or whatever, find themselves disproportionately represented. So I would assume that as we go forward, those stats will also be reported to the board. So I think it's really a step in the right direction, and I commend you for the innovation, and Deb for your enthusiasm for this. I see no further questions. Modernization project update. Chief, over to you.
Thanks so much, Chair Redmond. Very pleased to welcome the Modernization project update, a series of updates on some exciting initiatives that are happening within our organization. I'm pleased to welcome Superintendent Shayna Morris, who's our project lead on this exciting and innovative approach to policing, along with Mr. Bob Hillhorse, our Director of Information and Technology, also joining us, and a large team behind the scenes. But I'll turn it over to Shayna to take you through the exciting update, as well as the future of where we potentially see our organization going. So welcome, Shayna, and good morning.
Great. Thank you very much, Chief. And good morning, Chair Redmond and members of the board. As promised, we said we would come back with an update on our modernization project. Just to recap, that involves our body-worn camera, body-worn video, and in-car video program, our digital evidence management system, and also our smartphone deployment. So I'll just briefly take you through each one of those. For our in-car video program, we have outfitted 36 cruisers to date with the technology. That's 8 in traffic, the remaining in North Division. We do have 4 more vehicles that will be installed as they roll into the service, brand new vehicles. We did have some technology challenges that caused some delays in getting our in-car video systems working and fully functioning to their max capacity. Our goal was to have this implemented in June. It took us until mid-July, not too far off the mark, but the delays really were related to blending different types of technologies. And also COVID created a little bit of a problem getting our technicians on site to troubleshoot for us. Through this, we also learned that the in-car video system is truly most effective when it's combined with the body-worn video system. So as a result, we did outfit our traffic branch with some body-worn video systems, and they're currently using both technologies. And so for our body-worn, we have 73 video systems out in patrol currently, North Division and traffic. It doesn't mean that all 73 are out on the road at one time, but that's what we have available to us and rotating between different shifts. So far, this technology has proven to be reliable and low maintenance, and it also has been well received by the officers using the technology. However, we will rely on our member survey at the end of our pilot to just formally identify how well it's been received. Prior to the deployment of the videos systems, the officers received a fair amount of training, and a big portion of the training really involved focusing on privacy concerns. And our privacy impact assessments are continuing for both of these technologies as we go through the project. We also have our digital evidence management system, which I've spoken about before. That's our cloud-based storage system. And so far we have 275 members that are trained and have accounts basically. And those are the people we've trained up to allow them to use and support the body-worn and in-car video pilot. We are going to be training our remaining members throughout the service starting this fall, and that should take us into next year. So far, we have over 14,000 pieces of evidence that are currently logged into our DEMS system. About half of that is from the body-worn video, and a quarter of it is from our in-car video, but this ratio will change once we start bringing the entire service on board and we start using it outside of this pilot program. And as expected, the back end of this pilot program is where the resource requirements are needed. So our courts branch has dedicated extra members for the redaction and disclosure of the body worn in-car footage. That's for the prosecutions. We're still in the early stages, so we don't have any feedback available yet on how useful and effective this has been in our prosecutions, but that's something that we are working for gathering for you in the future. But I can say to date, they've prepped over 130 disclosures so far from body worn and in-car video. They also were experiencing some technology challenges that really just comes from us when we're required to blend different vendors and different applications. It just takes us a little bit to work out some of the bugs there. We do anticipate their workload will increase. We are continuing with workload assessments. Those are ongoing. We are learning from other services that are also working through this, that there's certainly more resources will be required to manage this side of the program in the future. So that's for really all for our DEMS that we have for you today. And then finally, just speak briefly about our smartphone deployment. I'm very excited to inform you, and as you heard, that the officers across patrol and throughout the entire service have been deployed and been given their own smartphone. So we have over 300 devices that are in the hands of the officers right now. The phones allow the officers to stay in the field longer, and they have been very positively received from the officers. And as you heard from Inspector McBride, it's a very exciting way for our service to modernize. It's allowing the officers to use these apps in the field. It allows them to connect to their community partners a lot faster with the community in general. And I think it's really helping WRPS lead the way in modernizing and putting us on the map across the province for some of the opportunities we have to offer working with our partner agencies. And the last thing I just want to touch on is some of our ongoing work. You had expressed an interest in this before, and that's our stakeholder engagement. So we've reached out to as many partner agencies as possible. We've completed all of our engagement stakeholders so far for anyone who's expressed an interest in working with us. We also conducted our community consultation. As you know, we had our webinar at the end of May. We had over 3,600 people participate. We've launched our general community survey with over 500 responses so far. And lastly, our equity, inclusion, and diversity team has contacted numerous stakeholder groups within the community and looking for opportunities to share perspectives and gather some feedback on how this program may impact them. We've had limited uptake on that so far, but it is still ongoing. We're still working through that. And then financial implications for us. So far, this project remains on target for budget. We're under budget and sitting at a value of $162,000 of an investment so far. And that's mostly just for infrastructure and pieces like that. And really, that's where we're at so far for our project. Thank you very much.
Thank you for a very thorough update, Superintendent Morris. Are there any questions from the board? Karen, go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for that presentation, and particularly the piece at the end related to that community engagement, which was really interesting. Thank you for that. It's not, my question isn't related to that at all. You sort of piqued my interest when you talked to me about phones, because perhaps I'm naive and I just assumed that our officers already had smartphones. So I'm just curious as to, was it just that only some people had it, not everyone, and this was just making sure everybody had it, or they had something before that weren't smartphones? I'm just kind of curious, just for a little bit more information there. You got me curious.
Thanks very much, Dr. Schnarr. And this may come as a surprise, but we've actually, although we've been engaged with the use of technology dating back to the launch of RIM and the original Blackberries, though generally we're senior leadership based. And so they were used by our leadership team. Then we rolled them out to sort of mid leaders. But the project that Superintendent Morris is leading was a complete rollout of smartphone technologies to every frontline patrol officer. A number of our investigative units in detectives in the area that Deputy Hilton leads, many of them have been using smartphones for a number of years, but this was about embracing a new approach and rolling it out right across the organization. And I think Shana will have the exact number. I think it's 244, but I could be wrong on the exact number.
It's 366.
There you go. Way off. I don't know where I got the 244 from. Way off. And so this was a massive piece. And then, of course, tied to this is around how do we now develop? So, for example, during the pandemic, all of our pre-screening is done through our smartphone applications. We develop an app and we do all pre-screening through that process. There's a tremendous opportunity even around the work that Deputy Crowell is leading around wellness, is that pushing out wellness apps on the actual smartphones. And so that in times of need or support, or where do we reach out to, there's also opportunities for educational pieces. Like we access data and information all the time, but we can make it on the smartphone. And finally, it's also around our member safety. So every car has a GPS. Every car had previously had a cellular phone in the vehicle, but our portable radios obviously do not have GPS, but they do have emergency features. But the future of this is really around computer-aided dispatch record management system at the fingertips of the officer. So we would move away from that traditional, very labor-intensive, costly in-car system, and actually the smartphone becomes the actual CPU, the hardware. So it's tied to a larger vision and strategy that will get there. Of course, this comes with investment and significant advancement. But the Toronto Police Service rolled this out. We're likely, the Ottawa Police Service rolled it out, and we're likely sort of in that frame of the third large organization in the province to roll this out. I do think that, there's also an organizational change, is that, understanding that device use is very unique. And so arguably, we always were worried about time, data downloads and all those pieces. And I think organizationally, we came to a point where we need to empower and support our membership. And this is the right approach. It's timely. And let's face it, in all of our worlds now, smartphones have become our new wallet. And so it's just the next iteration, and very excited. Tremendous leadership by Shana and Bob and the entire team. And quite frankly, our membership embracing this, because there's a growth perspective. Eventually foot patrol, bicycle patrol, our K9 unit can all be deployed. Our motorcycle unit can be deployed by smartphones. It's very exciting, and something that I think in our region that boasts such a technological epicenter in Canada, it speaks to the work that we're doing. So good, great stuff. And it's all really Shana and Bob's team that has been advancing this.
Karen, do you have any further questions?
No, I think that's great. And I think it makes a huge amount of sense to me. Like I said, I just was naive and I assumed that all of our officers would already have a tool like this, just because I'm so used to my kids living on their phones 24/7. So I think it's fantastic. And I think, to the chief's point, that idea of providing with information sharing, that fantastic presentation we just had about that innovative app, I think is a wonderful example of how this in the field immediately would be usable. But also I think from a safety perspective, it makes a huge amount of sense to me.
Super, thank you. Great question. And thank you, Superintendent Morris and Bob. We didn't call on you, but thank you for lighting up your screen. If there were any really hard technical questions, I know you would have been there. Thanks to the whole team. The next agenda item is June 2021 Financial Variance Report. Chief, do you want to kick this off?
Yeah, thanks, Chair Edmund. And actually a good tie to when we're talking about some of the work we're doing, innovation, best practices, promising practices. There's always a correlation and interaction to financial investments, financial implications. So pleased to welcome our Director of Finance, Ms. Kirsten Hand, to take you to our mid-year point. Although we are in September, this is the first opportunity to connect with the board to bring you sort of the status, but it also sets the context as we look to October and presenting the first iteration, actually multiple iterations of different scenarios as we looked at 2022. So pleased to welcome someone very familiar to the board that does a significant amount of work, and we're happy to have on our team, Ms. Kirsten Hand. Good morning, Kirsten, and welcome.
Morning. Yes, so the report before you today, it reflects the June year-to-date financials for both operating and capital, and we will be coming back to the board at the conclusion of the September results as well. So both operating and capital results to date are favorable to plan and are forecasted to remain within budget. From an operating budget perspective, at this point, we are forecasting a surplus to the end of the year of approximately 1.6%, and that's primarily driven due to vacancies throughout the year. So just quickly on an operating budget perspective, I'll just touch base on some of the highlights in the report. So year to date, we were at about 91% of our budget. The majority of that is in our staffing area again. We were under budget to date, $6.4 million. And again, that is due to savings in our full-time salaries area as a result of vacancies compared to our authorized strength. But on a positive note, there was 23 new sworn members hired in August. So at the time of this report, we were 2 under complement on the sworn perspective, but we're actually above complement, which will help us mitigate some known retirements to the end of the year. So on a sworn perspective, we have successfully been able to bring us up to complement, which will mitigate some of those savings that we have seen year to date. On a civilian perspective, we do continue to be below complement, and that variance is approximately, or at the time of this report, about 17 positions, but that stays relatively constant to more recent information as well. So the other piece that contributes to the year-to-date savings is our collective agreement expired in 2019. So we have baked into our information an estimated salary increase allocation for 2020, but the year-to-date results don't include any allocation for 2021 salary increase. So that contributes to the year-to-date savings. But again, that was factored in our determination of what the year-end surplus may be. Overtime is under budget by about $200K and continues to be reduced from 2020 levels by approximately 14%. And just some of the major items are other allowance and benefits. We are underspent. We had some estimates in terms of potential numbers of retired members for sick leave contractual payments, and those are under budget to date, as well as we continue to see under budget for training expenses, meetings and travel and conference expenses. So those continue to be realized, partly due to the pandemic situation. From a revenue perspective, we're slightly under budget. We continue to see lower volumes of our record checks, lower volumes of our paid duty. However, both are offset by reduced staffing costs. And from a pandemic perspective, the region has allocated $500K to WRPS, so that will offset any of our direct costs that we've incurred above budget due to the pandemic. And in addition to that, they're also allocating monies to us for our participation in the vaccine task force. From previous reports, we will see a permanent deficit on our revenue side of almost $1 million due to our court security prisoner transportation grant contract that was received for 2021, which was lower than 2020 levels. From a capital perspective, we spent about $7.3 million to date, with an additional $47 million committed for. Some of that relates to New Central that will be incurred in next year as well. So we've spent about 16% of the capital budget thus far. From a fleet perspective, we've replaced about 33 vehicles, another 4 were ordered, but we've completed all our purchases for 2021, and we expect to have about 14 hybrid vehicles in our fleet by year end, with the decision for next year and going forward that all patrol police rated vehicles will be hybrid moving forward. To note, there is no electric vehicle option at this point. But we are looking at electric vehicle options for our other non-patrol areas. From an IT perspective, we have the modernization project, which Superintendent Morris took us through. business intelligence tools, the replacement of our phone system and NG911. And at this point, we expect our business intelligence tools and our voice radio project to be completed this year. The voice radio project completed this year. From a facilities perspective, we spent about 1.6 million in terms of facility refresh, equipment lifecycle replacement. And some of our major facility projects is we did complete the redesign of our headquarters front entrance area to enhance security elements. New central is under construction. And the expansion of our front parking lot, implementation of sidewalks and crossing areas from Maple Grove into the campus is now complete. And we're looking at designs of implementing electric vehicle charging stations at our other buildings, but the one at headquarters is also being installed. And we continue with completing some of our security projects and evidence management projects. So that somewhat summarizes some of the major information within the report. I'll open it up to any questions.
Thank you so much for a thorough navigation of our finances to date. Board members, are there any questions? Thank you, Kirsten, for your hard work and for sort of bringing all together. It's a nice sequence that we heard about some of the innovative projects, and then hear how they're sort of winding through completion or through our budget process. So thank you very much for that. The next item is police reported crime statistics in Canada 2020, and Chief, over to you.
Thanks so much, Chair Edmund. And as we continue sort of the sequencing of our board agenda, the 2020 police reported crime statistics in Canada did come out actually in July. Of course, the Police Service Board, it was post a meeting date, and obviously we weren't able to get to the board in time. This is an ongoing update that we provide to the board to give you a contextual view of what's happening locally, provincially, and nationally. We do track this data from month to month, and so and I know the board very much is engaged. So that the data that we'll be presenting today may not come as a significant surprise. And I'll also remind you that it's 2020 data as we're in sort of the third quarter, but the pandemic has impacted Stats Canada's abilities. We are working very much at a national level with Stats Canada also to advance real-time information. But pleased to welcome Ms. Margaret Claude, our Manager of Strategic Services, and her team, very much manage all the data and data analysis within our organization. So welcome, Margaret. I know that this is a topic that you and I both enjoy. Not everybody enjoys, but you and I specifically love the annual reports from Stats Canada. So over to you, Margaret. Good morning.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning, Chair Edmund and members of the board. I'm going to walk through some of these slides, but I thought it might be easier to do it through a presentation. So I'm going to try to share my screen here. If you could let me know if that's working okay. Do you see the first slide?
Not yet.
Not yet, Margaret. There we go.
Okay, perfect. So there we go. Okay, so I'm just going to walk you briefly through the contents in your board package that are covered in page 167 to 177. I'll just briefly go through the background to this report, talk about crime rates, crime severity indices, and weighted clearances. As the Chief mentioned, this is an annual report that we do receive from Stats Canada. It normally comes at the end of July every year. There's quite a process to get the stats processed on our end, submitted to Stats Canada, as well as then through a very thorough verification process. So this is a big date every year for Stats Canada, along with publishing and releasing the report and the summary and the infographics. All the data tables also become available publicly on their website. And all these data tables provide information for geographies across Canada, as well as a number of different statistics for each of those areas. Most of the crime statistics that come from Stats Canada are based on a most serious violation counting methodology. So in this case, if there is a particular incident or event and a number of different violations occur, they count the one most serious violation. And using this methodology, they are able to better provide a historical comparison of jurisdictions all across Canada. So what we're showing you in the graphs in this report are trends over the past 5 years. We've included provincial and national levels, as well as a comparison with the other 12 larger municipalities in Ontario that we often use as a comparator to how we're doing. So we've included those 12 police services just here on the screen, and they're ordered roughly in order of population size as well. So from Toronto being the largest to Greater Sudbury being the lower population of these 12. So crime rates are the more traditional method of measuring crime. They're really based on a straight count or the volume of all crimes. And then they're divided by 100% or 100,000 population rate. So it is a comparison between different jurisdictions of different population sizes. The overall or the total crime rate is composed of offenses grouped into 3 categories. It includes the violent offenses or the crimes against persons, crimes against property, and then all the other criminal code violations. So just starting off with the total crime rate, Stats Canada has, they do a national kind of comparison along in this report, and they have indicated that according to their studies, there has been increases in crime rates over the last 5 years across Canada. And this was the first time in 2020 that they saw a decrease in crime rate, and the decrease in Canada in 2020 was actually down 10%. So obviously the COVID pandemic had profound impacts on these, the crime stats, the economy, our society in general. They did note that the police reported crime in the early months of 2020 was actually higher than previous years, but as the year progressed, the volume of crime did become significantly lower than earlier years. So you can see from this graph that the total crime rate did experience a decline in all the 12 large municipal police services in Ontario in 2020. Here, we've got the national 10% decline here on the right. We can also see a decline in our province. These are the 12 police services here, and the median represents the average across just those 12 municipal police services. So most of them all experienced a similar decline in the overall total reported crime. However, in Waterloo region, we experienced the smallest decline in comparison to all the others. Our decrease was only 1% in 2020. You can also see that we continue to remain above the median level. And in fact, this year we are the 4th highest of our other municipal partners when it comes to total crime rate. Moving on to just specifically the violent crime rate, Stats Canada recorded an annual decrease of 2% in violent crime across the country. In Waterloo region, we didn't see a decline. In fact, we did see our violent crime rate rise by 3%. And you can see that here in this graph right here. Compared to our other municipal partners across Ontario, we are now the 2nd highest jurisdiction in violent crime rate across Ontario. Looking at just property crime, across the country, Stats Canada recorded a decrease in property crime of 13% in 2020 from the previous year. And they also noted that this has been the largest percentage change in national crime statistics dating back to 1998. So again, significant impact and influence from the COVID pandemic. You will see in Waterloo region here, we also did see a decline in property crime in 2020. However, our decrease locally was only 1%. In other criminal code offenses, again, nationally, it was a 10% decline, a significant drop from the previous year. We also experienced a decline in Waterloo region. Our decrease was only 8%. Some of the violations in this area include offensive weapons, child pornography, breach of probation. And although all of the other areas in Ontario, or many of the other police services, did record a significant double-digit decrease in other criminal code offenses, our decrease, again, was not as significant, with only 8%. You can see that we're still far above the median level and coming at the 4th highest rate compared to our other municipal partners. The additional slide I'm including here is focusing in on child pornography related violations. And this is of note because the rate of violations for possessing or accessing child pornography has been steadily increasing over the previous 3 years at a national level, at a provincial level, and we can see also significantly at our local level. Waterloo region saw a 48% increase in the rate of violations for possessing or accessing child pornography between 2019 and 2020. It's well above the provincial rate and the national rate, and as well as the average among our 12 large municipal police services. I will also comment again, as we get into the crime severity indices, that this increase in child pornography violations was also a significant contributor to our local crime severity index as well. So moving into the crime severity indices, they are a newer measure of crime, and it is a weighted index that includes both the volume and the severity of police reported crime. So they were finding over the years there's a lot of lower level crimes that are high volume, and they can have an impact on the crime rate, but by including a weight into the severity of the crime, it's a different and more robust measure of crime in our communities. So each offense is given a weight, and it's based on the length of sentences that are applied. This is all done by Stats Canada, and it's using a base index value of 100 from 2006. So the total crime severity index, or the overall CSI, is composed of offenses grouped in 2 categories in this case. So it separates the violent offenses and the crimes against the persons as one category in and of itself. And then it groups the property crimes and the other criminal code offenses into the non-violent CSI. So looking at the total or the overall crime severity index, Statistics Canada has noted in this national publication that in 2020, similar to the national crime rate, all the measures of the CSI decreased for the first time after 5 years of increases across the country. So unlike the national decrease in the total CSI, in Waterloo region, we did see an increase in our local CSI. It increased from 73.3 to 74.5, or a 1.6% increase. Stats Canada also provides us some insight when they do their calculations and their measurements and their methodology of calculating the CSI. They had indicated to us that offenses included in identity theft and child pornography were significant contributions in the increase in the CSI, but they were also partially offset by our local decreases in sexual assault level 1 and robberies. So you can see from this slide here that locally we are the 4th highest of our other 12 municipal police services, and only 1 of 3 other police services that saw an increase in our total CSI in 2021. Looking at violent crime, or the Violent Crime Severity Index, again, at a national level, this decreased. It was a decline of 4% across the country. The violent crime in Waterloo region also decreased in this case by approximately the same amount. It went from 87.7 down to 84.8, which was a decrease of 3.3%. But you can see that we are still quite above the median level in regards to our violent crime severity index. And it's the 5th highest in comparison to some of our other jurisdictions across Ontario. Non-violent crime severity index, As mentioned, it includes both property and other criminal code offenses. Nationally, this decreased by 10% across the country in 2021. And locally, we saw an increase in this area as well, and an increase of about 3.9%. So it has, our nonviolent CSI is also above the median level, and is the fourth highest of our other municipal police services across Ontario. So just one more slide here I just want to bring to your attention. This one looks at weighted clearance rates, or total or overall clearance rates. Clearance rates represent the proportion of criminal incidents that are solved or cleared by police. According to Stats Canada, the total clearance rates also share the same limitation as total crime rates, in that overall totals can be dominated by high volume, less serious offenses. So similar to the concept of the crime severity index, the weighted clearance rates shown here, they assign a higher statistical value or a weight to the more serious crimes. So like the CSI, the total weighted clearance rates include both the violent and non-violent offenses. I'm just showing one graph here, but I would like to include that in all three categories, compared to the other 12 large municipal police services in Ontario, WRPS is below the median level for our clearance rates. In regards to our total weighted clearance rate, you can see here, we are at 33 and we are down from 35.2 in 2019. So I will leave the slides there. I do just want to include, just in conclusion, that as you know, you've probably heard me mention before, there are many, many factors that do influence police reported crime. Things like communities' trust in reporting to police, the ease of services available for reporting, the available police resources, priorities, crime prevention measures, and targeted enforcement practices. There's also other avenues of reporting crime that don't all get necessarily reported to police. 2020 did have significant impacts from COVID, but moving forward, our ongoing strategic enforcement, encouragement of reporting, and public education and prevention efforts will continue. Decreasing violent and property crime in our community continues to be priority goals in our services strategic business plan over the next 3 years. I'll leave it at that and open it up for any questions if there are. Thank you.
Thanks, Marg. If you don't mind to stop sharing.
Yes.
That would be great. Carl, go ahead.
Thanks for the report, Mark. I think, the figures to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, seem to indicate that we're becoming a target area for the outside of Greater Toronto area. It seems to me that the things are increasing in our area versus some of the other areas. Am I reading that right or not?
Marg, do you want to comment on that, or should we throw that one to the chief?
I'll leave that one to the chief, sure.
Thanks, Councillor Kiefer. I think actually I just want to highlight, if if we had the slide deck up, you can see that Hamilton, Niagara, Waterloo, London, and Windsor are definitely seeing a bit of a different trend. And if you look at the actual data, you'll notice that the GTA services are not necessarily, they're actually experiencing a reverse trend. I think that this speaks to the need, and I know the board, I'm a broken record for this, but it's the continued advocacy that as we continue to invest in the Greater Toronto area, we naturally suppress and we naturally move the tentacles and opportunities. But also, if you look at Hamilton, Waterloo, Windsor, and London, they're all growing communities. And so, naturally there's growth. There's different pieces in this whole piece. And this is why I continue to advocate that we have to have a provincial strategy as we deal in particularly with organized crime, guns and gangs, addiction. The work that we're seeing with human trafficking by the province is a really good model. We're seeing a significant investment. But again, it also highlights the impact of cybercrime and cyber implications when you look at particularly the child exploitation happening in our community, it's also around the dedication of resources. So it is a trend that we need to watch. It's a trend that we need to advocate on continued investment in policing provincially, but as well as provincial strategies as we roll through here. But you can see the correlation in the various slide decks, which are in your package, where you're just not seeing the same trends, particularly in the GTA, but on the fringe, which I believe are communities that are a part of the great horseshoe, Niagara, Hamilton, Waterloo, and then further west, London and Windsor. And I'm sure that, the London chief is having a conversation when Waterloo ramps up suppression. They actually deal with Woodstock, and London deal with pushouts from our community and our region, similarly as Brantford does. So again, great observation, something that we continue to monitor and watch, as well as integrate into our strategies of working with multi-jurisdictional investigations.
Thanks for the clarification, Chief.
So Chief, I don't see any other hands, and you've sort of touched on what my concern was when Marg, and a great presentation, Marg, and I'm really excited, not only that you get excited about statistics, but you make them so understandable for the rest of us. That the whole impact of child exploitation and pornography, Chief, you always do a really good job about talking about sort of the virtual crime and cyber crime, as well as, real life crime that people are engaged with. And the child exploitation seems to have skewed or had a disproportionate impact in the weighting. And I'm just wondering, is part of the incidence of this the fact that we've dedicated resources to catching cyber criminals?
Yeah, thanks so much. I know Superintendent Fenton's also on the call, who leads that specific area of investigation. But I think, the province of Ontario, in particular, the Solicitor General, has really made this a focus around the exploitation of humans, not only in human trafficking, but also online components. The RCMP also deserve a nod and a shout out as they look at a national strategy. And so they're doing more work, which is pushing work into our respective organizations tied to the Ontario Provincial Police Service, which is also doing some significant work. We've had actually a long history of support and collaboration with the Ontario Provincial Police ICE project, which is the Internet Child Exploitation piece. We've actually, in fact, are a Western hub for coordinating some of those activities. But I'll be very candid. I think we're only scratching the surface. I think that if we dedicated more resources that we've seen in other global jurisdictions, such as United Kingdom, our crime rates would significantly change. I think that, I equate this to, I think, Chair Red, and I'll use the analogy, is that we're policing two neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. Policing the traditional neighborhood, which is, people out and about in communities. And then we're also now trying to figure out how do we police the World Wide Web, social media, and other pieces. But Superintendent Fenton, you may want to provide some commentary. It is an area that we believe requires enhanced investment and more resources dedicated to it. We're trying to balance all those organizational priorities around our budget, et cetera. But Eugene, I don't know if you want to add any context to what's happening locally, provincially, and how our service is actually working very closely provincially to advance these platforms.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning, Chair Edmund and members of the board. Yeah, I would just add that that it is one of those crime types that the more you look, the more you're going to find. So the more we have dedicated resources, to your comment, and we have through some provincial funding added an additional ICE investigator last year. So that does increase the amount of cases that they're able to process. So the way the system works is that we receive tips from the centralized kind of clearinghouse that identifies a problematic internet traffic that is of concern for child exploitation. And the tips far outweigh the amount of resources that we can actually get to as far as accomplishing those investigations. So naturally, the more we can dedicate to it, the more we're going to find. So if we were to double the number of investigators tomorrow, you can expect a corresponding doubling of stats in relation to child exploitation the following year. It's simply one of those areas that I agree with the chief that we're only scratching the surface on, and it really comes down to the number of resources that we can afford to dedicate to it, and balancing all the other needs for public safety in our regions. But I agree completely with both of your comments that it comes down to the amount we're dedicating to it. And as important as it is, we're just trying to balance it with all the other important pressing needs.
And I think, Chair Redmond, the uniqueness of this is how do we actually work provincially to develop a prevention strategy? When you think of the vulnerability of those being exploited, it's very challenging. And the long-term impact on society and all of our different systems, we know that trauma has a significant long-term impact. And so how do we actually work with our provincial partners and our provincial government to build a province-wide and or a national strategy that's focused on prevention? And so those are some of the challenges of, what's our role in advancing that and promoting that? We're very much, obviously, we're grateful. We've had tremendous support from Minister Jones in advancing some financial dollars to add the investigator. We're grateful for that, but you can see the outcome is more enforcement, more discovery. But in correlation to this needs to be the great work of our Child Youth Advocacy Center locally needs continued investment as well to keep up with the demands as well as the reduction of victimization. So this is actually a sad issue that we're highlighting, but it speaks to the continued work of providing policing services to neighborhoods, which is something that a decade ago, the impact of two neighborhoods wasn't as real as it is. And when we speak about the implications of police budgeting and the cost of policing, these are the realities. And I'm not sure that our community fully understands or comprehends some of the challenges that we're facing.
Thank you for that very much. And thank you, Superintendent Fenton, too, for not only your contribution, but all the work you're doing on an ongoing basis. It's really important work, but I can only venture to imagine how tough it is to do. So thank you. The next item is Waterloo Regional Police Intelligent Notes 2021 Q2 report. And Chief, over to you. And it looks like Marg is on this one as well.
Thanks, Chair Redmond. This is an ongoing commitment to reporting and compliance with the board. That's something very important. I always like to highlight that we're the only police service in Ontario that is reporting on this particular piece, and credit to the police board for their policy and governance of this. It's very much tied to the work that we do around our investigations and very much tied to a very unique process. It's also in the consent agenda. You would have seen the regulated interactions. The reality is that there's really no movement around regulated interactions. We continue to monitor. We're in compliance provincially, and we see a low threshold of such. So Ms. Denise Lowe, who normally presents on some of this, on some of our race-based data collection as well as data analytics, is not with us today, but a big part of Margaret's team. And so Margaret's going to take the board through the report that has been developed by Ms. Lowe. Over to you, Margaret.
Thanks, Chief. Yeah, just a few highlights from Denise's report. As the Chief mentioned too, this is a quarterly commitment. The regulated interactions in the consent agenda. I do just want to draw your attention to the difference between regulated interactions and intelligence notes. There's a lot of questions, and it's tricky just to understand the difference. So both of these tools are used for the documentation of persons and activities, but they differ in the way the identifying information is collected. So the identifying information in the intelligence notes can be collected where no interaction takes place at all, or it's just an officer's observation. Sometimes there is an interaction with the persons, but it is at first lawful, or where the identifying information is derived from a third party, or the person's already known to the officer. And on the other hand, the regulated interaction collects information from an individual by specifically asking the individual. So there is a clear interaction. So as the Chief mentioned, these are the two Q2 reports in your package this time. In the 2021 Intelligence Notes quarterly report for April to June 30th, there were 179 unique intelligence notes processed. In total, there was a total number of subjects recorded in these notes of 247. So one note may have multiple subjects, and a subject isn't always necessarily a person, although that's mostly what they are. So of the 247 person subjects recorded in this quarter, 25% did not have a permanent residence in our region or any permanent residence at all. By location, most of these intelligence notes took place in our North Division Zone 5. By perceived race, individuals were perceived as white 49% of the time, and followed by individuals who were perceived as Black, 24%, and another 8% at unknown. By perceived gender, there were 189 persons identified as male, and that accounted for 77% of all the intelligence notes where a person was identified in the second quarter. So as you know, a more detailed proportionality analysis will be conducted in the annual report when we have the opportunity to look at 12 full months worth of information. This is just a quick review provided on a quarterly basis. We do continue to look at this at a regular time periods and are committed to sharing this publicly with you. So I'll open it up to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marg. Are there any questions or further comments? Thank you very much for this report. And again, I too commend the board for requesting this on a quarterly basis. The next agenda item is quarterly use of force statistical report Q2. Chief, over to you.
Thanks so much, Chair Redmond and members of the board. Again, you can see that we have a number of quarterly updates as we roll through. This is something that we've committed to the board. We previously had been quarterly reporting, and then it's made a change to biannual, and we're back quarterly because of the importance. I'm very pleased to welcome Inspector Jason Boucher of our professional development unit to provide you an update, and then either myself and or Jason and others could take questions related to the report. So good morning, Jason, and welcome. I think it's good afternoon now, but officially good afternoon, Jason.
Thanks, Chief, and thanks, Chair Redmond and members of the board. And also thanks to Jill for assisting me in hosting this presentation. You're becoming very familiar with it, but Jill, if you could move to the next slide, please. By way of background, if you recall, we began preparing this report quarterly starting in 2021. The period of this report is for April 1st to June 30th of this year. This is only the second use of force report provided on a quarterly basis. And again, by way of refresher, reportable incidents are those incidents that require use of force report by legislation and or WRPS procedure. A reportable incident may generate several use of force reports, one for each officer involved, and that excludes team reports that are completed by the emergency response team. Each use of force report is subject to 3 layers of scrutiny, that being by the staff sergeant of the platoon or unit, the senior leader of the unit branch division, and finally, the sergeant in charge of training. On to the next slide, please, Jill. Occurrences at 77,211 were up, as were arrests at 3,700 over the first quarter of 2021. We continue to believe that public health measures due to COVID impact this number, but we expect that as public health restrictions decrease, that will decrease as well over time. Of the use of force incidents, there were 68 in this quarter, and these were down from the previous quarter of 92. Now, while each of these is significant and requires scrutiny, the number remains very small, which is indicative of our members' ability to use appropriate intervention strategies before resolving situations through use of force options. Further analysis of this data is illustrated in Figure 8, reveals that only 9% of these incidents were what we would consider officer generated. And this number has remained relatively stable over time since we began examining this data set. The vast majority, or 72% of these, were requests by members of our community for our assistance. On to the next slide, please, Jill. This slide provides an analysis of what call types resulted in intervention involving reportable incidents. You'll note that the predominant driver continues to be dangerous weapons calls, those in which a weapon is believed or known to be involved. You will note as well that dangerous weapons calls requiring a use of force response increased considerably from the first quarter of this year. And I'll note as well too, these aren't all dangerous weapons calls or all calls of this type. These are specifically calls which necessitated a use of force report due to the intervention involved. Next slide, please, Jill. This table summarizes use of force options utilized excluding conducted energy weapons, which we will see in the next slide. As we've said in the past, use of force reports were and are intended primarily to allow for oversight of the appropriateness of officer response to a particular situation. In addition, we can attempt to spot trends in the data over time. For instance, the introduction of the conducted energy weapon has resulted in a marked and sustained decline in the use of other secondary weapons, such as OC spray and baton. A quick examination of this table, however, illustrates how volatile a small data set can be. Most of these numbers have fluctuated significantly over time. It's important to point out here that despite this, we have never discharged a carbine rifle outside of the humane dispatch of an animal. As well, in this quarter, we have not had to discharge a handgun outside of the humane dispatch of an animal, demonstrating again our members' skill in de-escalating a situation. As well, there were no canine deployments during this quarter that met the threshold of use of force report. Next slide, please, Jill. This slide provides a breakdown of conducted energy weapon use. Recall that a procedural change between 2019 and 2020, which now requires our officers to report on CEW deployments simply due to the removal of the CEW from its holster in the presence of a member of the public, resulted in a significant increase to the drawn-only category. The CEW continues to demonstrate its effectiveness at de-escalating a situation simply through its display. Next slide, please, Jill. Injuries to both subjects and officers decreased this quarter over last, with no injuries of a serious nature occurring to the end of the second quarter of 2021. As you can see from this figure, injuries to both subjects and officers continue to be extremely low. Next slide, please, Jill. As you know, the province of Ontario required the reporting on officer perception of subject race and provided the race-based categories by which this would be done at the beginning of 2020. Figure 6 provides a summary of this data. Because of the challenges that we identified using use of force report to collect data of this type, our service made the decision to provide raw data in Appendix C in our report to the board. This appendix provides a summary of the subject's perceived race, how the call was generated, the type of occurrence, along with a short synopsis of the circumstances, the subject's profile behavior upon which a choice of intervention response was based, along with the response of the officer. It does occur from time to time, but occurred with greater frequency this quarter, where situations where officers responded to calls for service where a subject was never located. In these situations, officers chose response options based upon information provided by those who called police. For example, I draw your attention to row 3 of the attached table from Appendix C. Here, police were called to the report of a robbery involving firearms. A canine track was conducted along with our emergency response team in an effort to locate the subjects involved. However, this track was unsuccessful. In this circumstance, as officers did not locate a subject, they were unable to perceive the race of an individual. Therefore, this information was obtained through an examination of notes made by the call taker from the complainant on our computer-aided dispatch system. You can move to the next slide, please, Joe. So despite the frequency of interaction with members of our community, over 77,000 occurrences and 3,700 arrests in this reporting period, very few, or approximately 0.1%, resulted in a reportable incident. Injuries to both subjects and officers occurred during these incidents remain very low. De-escalation training has been effective and will continue to be the cornerstone of officer intervention training. In 2021, we have enhanced this commitment with our officer intervention and EDI components. And while the provincially mandated use of force report remains a valuable tool for analyzing officer actions, several deficiencies have been identified, which limit comprehensive data analysis. Next slide, please. Use of force reporting to the board will continue on a quarterly basis and will be incorporated into the WRPS race-based data collection strategy in the future. The Training and Education Unit is working collaboratively with the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion team to ensure close alignment with principles and actions outlined in the EDI strategic plan. Implicit bias awareness and Indigenous awareness training have been completed in anti-racism training with emphasis on anti-Black racism training, continues in 2021. And with that, I open it up to questions.
Thank you very much, Inspector Boucher. Are there any questions? Karen, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. It's always interesting. I wanted to go back to the figure 2, which was the call types resulting in use of force. And we've been talking a little bit in this meeting already about increases in crime-related, violent crime in particular. And so I just wanted to get a bit of a better understanding of the data here, because it's shown as raw data as opposed to potentially percentage data. So do you have any sense of perhaps percentage increases over what we saw? I know these are Q1, Q2. Is it higher, as a percentage of overall calls in Q2, and what does that look like compared to last year? And I apologize for the question, because I know that's not the data we have here. The data we have here is pure raw numbers, but I'm just wanting to kind of match the information that we've been seeing in terms of rise in violent crimes with the data that you're showing us here today.
So, Chief,
so much, Dr. Schnarr. I know that throw it over to Inspector Boucher, but also Miss Margaret Glode may be able to provide some support on that as well. So Jason, if you want to take a response, and or Margaret, if you want to supplement.
Yeah, great question, Dr. Schnarr. Keep in mind, this isn't raw data for any of these call types. These are just raw data for that specific call type where a use of force option was chosen at that particular time, right? So I think specific to the trend per, let's say, 100,000 calls, I would probably turn that over to Mark for her comment.
What I would add is that the crimes that I showed to you before, the UCR, the Uniform Crime Reported Codes and violations, as you can see, they take a little while through the processing, the verification system to get to the state where we can really analyze them thoroughly. So what we often use is the call types, and that's what you're seeing in Jason's report. Call types we have at our ready disposal. They're not automatically reflective of the crimes that are involved, but they're a good indicator, and we can get them in a more timely manner. So we do have, when we're looking at the call types, we just have to keep that in mind, that they're not necessarily all going to be tied to a specific crime down the road, although that would be an incredible research study to see where that correlation exists, but we wouldn't have that ready at hand right now.
Karen, any further comments?
Would it be fair to say, and don't, if I'm wrong, don't hesitate to tell me, would it be fair to say that call, like the dangerous weapon call types, it would not be unusual to see those circumstances more often result in a use of force situation?
I could jump in on that one. I would say that would be very fair to say.
Okay.
Oftentimes, and it's demonstrated in the example that I provided with respect to the robbery, where officers are receiving call information on the way to the call and will make their decisions with respect to use of force options prior to getting there. And keep in mind as well, too, that use of force, and this is what's really a big struggle with the term use of force, is oftentimes force is never used. It may, in fact, just simply be displayed. It may be that we bring our carbine rifle out of the car and a member of the public sees us, which then triggers a use of force option. But you're right, those two things would be, I would say, highly correlated.
Well, and the data shows that, from the latter part of your presentation, that it seems to me from the service tries, their hardest to not use force at the end, like it's those stages, just we see from the data that you provided there as well.
Thank you for that. Any further questions or comments? Well, thank you, Inspector Boucher, and thank you, Mark, for pinch hitting. Great conversation. The next agenda item is 2020 Waterloo Regional Police Service Annual Report. It is attached, and Chief Larkin, over to you.
Thanks so much, Chair Redmond, and I don't intend to go through the entire 2020 annual report, and with your permission, I'd like to mesh my monthly report into the annual report as well. And I have actually popped it up on the screen for everybody and hoping you can see that. as we roll through here. So task number 1 completed. Chief of Police has shared screen, which is always exciting. But I do want to take a moment, one, to recognize the 2020 annual report. Although it's 72 pages in length, it speaks to 365 days, 7 days a week and 24 hours a day of immense community leadership and community service by the more than 1,100 members of the Waterloo Police Service. And on behalf of Deputy Chief Hilton and Deputy Chief Crowell and the entire leadership team, we're immensely proud of the work that our members do each and every day. We truly do believe that we're fulfilling our mission, which is the community engagement, community collaborative partnerships that really commit and build and strengthen community well-being across Waterloo region. And, you know, 2020 is a year like no other. We've often used that term of how did we police in a pandemic? And I think the annual report is broken into 3 key sections: your service, and that's the community service that with our citizens who require, rely on, or call the WRPS. Our community, your community, who we are within our community and the work that we do, and of course, the data and the statistics of the very many areas. I do want to take a moment to recognize Miss Sherry Greeno, our Manager of Corporate Communications, and her team, who's pulled together the document that you have before us. And of course, you know, it highlights our values. I think the one thing I really enjoyed about going through the annual report is that it does speak to our people and partnerships. It does speak to our integrity and respect, not only internally, but also externally, our commitment to continuous improvement. And you've seen that today in our modernization project. You've seen that in the work that we're doing around data collection and use of force, as well as, you know, looking at crime trends. Like, we're continuously looking to improve how we do business, but also deliver services. And of course, the accountability piece. Much of our reporting today is around transparency, around building trust and confidence as we roll through. And so this is a bit of a unique approach. You know, several years ago, we've actually moved away from this hard copy of a report and went to an online digital format. And what we heard from our different stakeholders and partners was they actually missed that tangible hard report, which is unique in a world of digitization and modernization. And so I do want to assure the board, as a part of our engagement piece, more than 350 of these have gone out to partners, to stakeholders, to all levels of government. And also, we're satisfying one of our Police Services Act requirements, which is to report annually. And so, you know, this annual report has been filed and delivered with great pride to the Ministry of Solicitor General, as well as all of our governors. And it does provide a series of highlights in our organization and of the work we're doing. And again, it talks about who we are as an organization. It provides us opportunity. It speaks to our community. It speaks to, you know, various units. And what we've done this year is we've highlighted a series of particular areas. Our communication center, which is the public safety answering point that we operate on behalf of the Regional Waterloo. And it's really the hub, and it's the nerve center of who we are as an organization. When somebody's in distress and that call to 911 comes in and is triaged, it's these members that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 provide support. And often when we play, you know, voice radio clippings, you'll hear that calm voice trying to answer questions, collect information. And even as Inspector Boucher described, as much of our members rely on the data collection, the information collection at the front end, which pushes it out. As you can see, in 2020, more than 160,000 non-emergency calls answered, more than 141,000 911 calls answered and triaged, which is simply amazing when you look at the output that is happening. And so, to give you a perspective, you know, on a serious, for example, collision, our communication center will receive up to 30 911 calls to deal with that collision. That is one of the, you know, really modernization of the smartphone, is that citizens can actually engage and connect. And as we look to the future of next generation 911, our communication center will only grow and continue to enhance as we provide services on behalf of the Regional Waterloo. But want to thank and recognize our communication center members for their amazing work that they're doing. Of course, we talked about the cybercrime unit, and I often really relate to this is the cybercrime neighborhood policing team, where we provide support online and a significant amount of work. Social media has changed much of the work that we do. Every large event and every large planning that our operational support team does, our major event planning team that does amazing work, is very much connected to cybercrime and looking what's happening in our virtual world. And you can see, some of the staggering numbers here. 485 internet child exploitation investigations. That's more than one a day in our region. And it's it's a very sad state when we discuss this, but it's something that, as Superintendent Fenton alluded to, is how do we advance and continue to move forward and bring attention to this. We are looking at continued partnerships. We have a unique partnership with a local tech company, Magnet Forensics, as we advance and look at different processes. But of course, that neighborhood is no longer just within Waterloo. And here we can see we highlight a partnership with the United Kingdom and how we actually liaise outside of our boundaries to move forward. And so, again, very proud of the work that is happening in cybercrime as we roll through here. I often talk about one of the challenges we're facing in our community, and we look at the tragedies of overdose rates and overdose deaths across Waterloo region, across our province, and nationally, is the impact of addiction in our community and the impact of illicit drugs, and hence the continued work in partnership with the Police Services Board. Our police service has a responsibility of focusing on those that target the vulnerable, the marginalized, those that are actually dealing with addictions. Our focus is on the traffickers. We believe in modernized drug policy that supports addiction as a health issue, a healthcare matter, where those that require support actually get the help they need. And so our continued work with the integrated drug strategy, I was very proud, Chair Redmond, to join you at the Overdose Awareness Day most recently, where we paid tribute to the families of those that have lost their life due to overdose, due to addiction. And we know that there's more that can be done from a policy perspective, but we need to continue to invest in enforcement of those that actually prey on the vulnerable. And you can see a series of highlights that we've done over the course of the year from our drugs and firearms unit. We know that drug trafficking is often tied to organized crime, tied to gang activity, as well as is a culture of fear, intimidation, and the use of firearms. And so there's a nexus between the work we're doing. But when you look at simply, the total value of drugs seized for 2020, $2.6 million of illicit drugs seized within Waterloo region. And we know that those in need require and or spend $120 a day to meet their addiction. And hence the continued work that we're doing around advancing safe supply, not only locally, provincially, and nationally, and advocating for such change. But you can look at the amount of 210 charges laid, 62 individuals arrested related to significant drug seizures, 32 search warrants, currency seized, vehicles seized. And you can see the breakdown consistently, the challenges of cocaine and crystal meth in our community, as well as obviously the continued impact of fentanyl in our community. And so we need to continue to have an integrated approach to this work that we're doing. But again, we also need a continued investment on those that traffic, and that is around the multi-jurisdictional work that we're doing in neighborhood policing and investigations. There's probably no other crime that is so personally intrusive, which is around break and enters and thefts from vehicles, because it's our home, it's our safety net. Even our car is much of the world we travel in. Some of us do many phone calls. Some of us are now doing Zoom calls in cars, not while we're driving, but actually parked at the side of the roadway in this world that we're in. And so I'm very proud of the work of break and enter in vehicle. We've seen an increase in stolen vehicles, again, very much tied to organized crime, very much tied to recently we dealt with a motorcycle chop shop. But you look at this larger perspective of the work that we're doing, this team is tenacious. I often refer to the break and enter vehicle theft unit as sort of the rock stars of our organization, because they're very committed, because they recognize the victimization and the impact on our citizens, and they do amazing work to do this. And you can look at 826 charges laid 120 individuals arrested, 27 search warrants related to supporting those victims of break and enters and theft from vehicles. And so it's very important that we continue to also work on prevention. And so how do we prevent these types of things from happening? How do we enhance home security? How do we continue to advocate with auto manufacturers around actually dealing with theft of vehicles? And most recently, we've seen a very complex approach where electronic starters technology was used to actually intercede and start vehicles. But again, you can see just over 2,100 occurrences investigated, a significant amount of work done by our team, and we're very proud of that. Our general investigations unit had a couple of major projects last year, an arson project in Waterloo, the robbery team project to deal with increasing commercial and person-on-person robberies, a significant Walmart arson investigation that really brought provincial and national attention. You can see that this unit deals with significant pieces, and I want to point to the 663 sudden death calls. That's a massive amount of workload on our general investigations, and a large portion of these are actually in partnership with the coroner's office, and a large portion are related to overdose deaths. And so you can see how the complexity of our society has changed the demand on our service, particularly around sudden death calls. And so we're grateful for their professionalism as they try to balance a very heavy schedule. The Intimate Partner Violence Unit, our service in partnership with Horizon has always had a very modernized, progressive approach, and we've enhanced that with Women Crisis Services as well. We continue to invest, and we've recently also transitioned the language that we use, and it's now Intimate Partner Violence Unit. We've done some significant work around early intervention as we continue to roll through this. Our victim services unit tied to the work of the Intimate Partner. Of course, we've enhanced work with Women Crisis around a one-year pilot project, which sees a better wraparound support for victims of Intimate Partner. And so some really unique things that continue to happen there. We continue to be housed at a Horizon on Queen Street, which is a unique model. It's a wraparound model, and also has our youth protection unit and our partnership with our Child Youth Advocacy Center. I still believe that we're a model to be followed. And in a younger version of Deputy Crowell, he was a large part of the structure and the building of this back in the early 2000s. And so, Mark, as we celebrate over a decade, the fruition of your work is, along with retired Inspector Toad, continues to serve a national model. But you can see the staggering number of calls. Over 6,100 calls for service, more than 3,600 judicial charges laid, 319 warrants completed. And one of our always anticipated peaks was that we would see Intimate Partner violence in our community peak, and we would see the reduction. And the reality is we've never actually realized the reduction. And so we need to reaffirm our commitment to working with our partners to look at prevention, to look at early intervention, and to ensure that we continue to provide support to those victims in need. Of course, our financial crime continues to evolve. Bitcoin, you talk about cybercrime as we continue to roll through some of these pieces are very important. And you can see the current demand on this. I'm going to speak very briefly about road safety. It continues likely to be one of the greatest inboxes, likely for our elected officials on the line here. But we've very much been focused on the fatal four, and that is around distracted driving, impaired driving, failure to wear seatbelts, and of course, speeding. Those four are significantly connected to serious personal injury collisions and fatal collisions. And so the work that we continue to do, we're enhancing our road safety. We have a dedicated road safety team every month, with the exception of the summer months. And we continue to invest in this and continue to support modernized progressive engineering and roadway design, as well as automated speed enforcement. So a special shout out to our traffic service unit for all the work that they're doing. And particularly this week, as we head back to school, they're in school zones ensuring the safety of our most precious cargo, our children. You can see that we did have a challenging year in our roadways, and this is data that we've reported previously to the board, but we continue to invest heavily in road safety. Major crime, as we look at the violent crime rate and crime severity index, much of the work lands on Superintendent Fenton's area around major crime. They're very much connected to obviously serious hit and run, fatal collisions, major incidences, the drug overdose, and and criminal investigations. The workload is significant, it's complex, and our court system is demanding more and more. Over the last 30 years, we've averaged about 5 homicides a year. You can see last year, 8 homicide investigations, 8 attempt murder investigations, and 4 death under 5 investigations. Our major crime team is really devised of the best, skilled investigators who are committed to providing the voice of those that no longer have a voice. And so we continue to invest significantly. You can see our 10-year homicide trends consistently starting to rise. It's not unexpected as our community grows and we see some of the impacts of violent crime in our community. Again, Special Victims Unit, I spoke of this previously, but you can see the staggering amount of investigations that they're doing, 349 sexual assault investigations, and a shout out to our partners at the Sexual Assault Treatment Center, as well as the Sexual Assault Support Center, who do a significant amount of work with our organization. We've really enhanced, thanks to our local advocate, Ms. Maureen Trask, who turned a personal tragedy into a really national advocacy. We've significantly invested in missing person investigations. I will point to human trafficking, 104 investigations. And this is another crime, as Superintendent Fenton alluded to, is that when we invest resources, unfortunately, we uncover significant victimization and tragedy. We're very grateful to receive continued funding from the province. We also have a multi-jurisdictional unit with the Guelph Police Service, 483 youth protection investigations, and 100 senior support team investigations. As our population ages, they're often targeted for victimization. Criminal intelligence is something that we're doing significant amount of work. We're seeing, again, it's tied to the cybercrime world, but one of the challenges we're facing is hate and hate crime as we continue to go through. These are challenging times for us as a society, and the police service intersects and has to work with partners to manage the whole challenges of online hate in particular, and we've been advocating nationally for enhanced legislation to deal with that. Of course, we have 4 canine units that do significant work. They're often out and about, and there you can see them. We have Grim, Tracker, and Chase and Ranger that are valuable partners and do significant amount. You can see that they're 25 arrests, 35 warrants, and of course they do article searches as we roll through. This is a mandated under the Police Service Act that we must have either an agreement to provide canine services, but the demand locally is that we have our own canine unit. And you can see our 4 handlers, and I often feel bad because we highlight the canines, which are much beloved, but behind them are also 4 individuals that dedicate a significant amount of work to caring. The canines do live with their handlers. They spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with their handlers. So kudos to them for the work that they're doing. Our equity, diversity, inclusion unit, we continue to acknowledge that we have work to do. We continue to acknowledge that our system has been impacted by systemic racism, systemic discrimination, and systemic barriers. And we continue to advance our strategy. And in October, our board will have an update as to the work that we're doing. But a special thanks to Staff Sergeant Eric Boynton and the entire equity team for their continued work that they're doing. Of course, behind this is we have an administrative branch. You can see that just under 30,000 records checks completed last year, just under 700 kilograms of controlled drugs that were disposed of, 690 firearms and prohibited weapons disposed of. And so there's also a massive team behind the scene that keeps all of our operations running. And often our public only sees the cruiser and the public facing side of this. But we have an amazing team of 380 civilian professionals behind the scenes that make it all happen. And our administrative branch would be one of those. And a special shout out to all the work that they're doing in records and access to information, our police reporting and our citizen-centered service, and of course, our evidence management unit. And of course, I want to highlight our amazing, we're a human service delivery. And as Ms. Han presented the budget today, as the board is aware, 90% of our budget is allocated to resources. And I make no apology for that because we're a human service delivery. We deliver humans. We deal with complex social issues by deploying an empathetic, caring professional, well-trained professional. And you can see one here, Constable Omar Mojadi, who joined our service, was formerly a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital and did a career transition. And, you know, you'll note his quote, "It's all I ever wanted to do," he says, "is helping people and making a difference was always important to him, not only through his nursing career, but also now as he transitioned into policing." And I can tell the Police Services Board that in years to come, this officer will be a big part of our organization and a big part of our community. We're also pleased to highlight Constable Steve McKenna, who is an older recruit who transitioned from a professional sporting career into policing. Constable Nicole Morrison, who was a university all-star academic and athletic, who played basketball at the Wilfrid Laurier University, and can be seen doing much community work and will be highlighted in our upcoming recruiting video that we'll release. All of these members are the fabric of who we are as an organization. They're humans, and they actually bring their lived experience into the work that they do. Constable Harpreet Singh down in South Division. Very proud of Harpreet. He is our first Sikh wearing, turban wearing officer. Has done significant amount of work to advance inclusion in our organization as well as externally. He serves the South Division. And, you know, one of his quotes here is an opportunity to make an impact in your community. He wanted a profession that could actually provide the opportunity to uplift others, fulfilling his passion and make my family and your community proud. And Constable J.K. Gill, who actually works in our Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Unit. J.K. has been an instrumental member of our service and also welcoming and bridging the relationships with our Sikh community. And he talks about pride, respect, and integrity. And he's a big part. And if you ever get to meet Constable Gill, his booming smile will brighten any room in any situation that he comes into. And so we wanted to highlight a series of our members. Of course, we're very proud last year to welcome 2 new deputy chiefs, Deputy Shirley Hilton and Deputy Mark Crowell, phenomenal police leaders who are leading provincially, nationally, as well as locally. And we're blessed and privileged to have their amazing leadership. We also welcomed a number of new senior officer promotions, and we've added to that. And I'm very proud to say that from a senior leadership perspective, although we have work to do around advancing racialized members, we're gender balanced. And I think that that's an important part of the work we're doing. And, you know, this team is incredibly skilled, and the board gets to see a number of them on a regular occasion as we roll through here. I won't speak to training because Inspector Boucher just took you all through that, but we're very pleased with the work that we're doing. 285,000 occurrences, just over 12,000 arrests. And of course, you can see that in less than 0.1% where we have some form of intervention. We've done some corporate restructuring. Of course, we've been policing in a pandemic, and we continue to police in a pandemic. Our Emergency Operations Center has done phenomenal work in keeping us safe and healthy. And the work of Superintendent Bursey and Inspector Donna Mancuso has continued to lead us to a safe workplace. Overall, we're very pleased with the work that has happened in the sense of protecting our workforce. And of course, we're grateful for the work of Deputy Hilton in leading the vaccination task force. Special thanks to, even behind the scenes, Mr. Scott Agnolo, our materials management and fleet manager. You know, never before has our burn rate of personal protection equipment been what it's been. Never before have we cleaned as many floors and cruisers. It's just simply amazing, and it couldn't be done without people like Scott and Chris Gibson, our manager of facilities, that keep everything rolling and moving. Again, you can see our overall a limited amount, and in 2020, you know, we had 4 positive cases. Now year over year, that completely, we've had 32 positive cases. I still think that that's an amazing number based on the amount of interactions we have with the community. Of course, we continue to be committed to our community through Backpack Winter Wear campaign, one of a kind, 24 acts of kindness. It's all who we are as we roll through this. We have incredible volunteers that have slightly been sidelined. Our ceremonial band and our chorus have not been active through the pandemic, but our auxiliary police has been very active in supporting a number of different initiatives, including ensuring people get to their vaccination appointments safely. We anticipate that they're back rolling out fully as we roll through. We've welcomed all kinds of different members in our organization. Of course, we're very active on our social media and connecting and finding different ways as we roll through all of this. And of course, I'm looking forward to the Officer Oween as we head into October. It's amazing to see the young people who want to become future police officers and see their costumes and all their different pieces. I'm partial to all of them. I know Commissioner Lucky from the RCMP particularly loves that photo of the little moose and the little Mountie, but we're partial to the municipal police officers as we roll through. And again, you know, as we head back to school, we continue to walk the chalk event, and we did that last year, we did it this year, and you can see some of our social media interactions. We just wrapped up our 2018 to 2020 operational plan. Of course, we've now have the new strategic plan that is out, coming to you very soon. It's online as we roll through here. And so as I roll into very quickly sort of where we're at, that's 2020 in a nutshell, and it doesn't do justice to the amazing work that we're doing in challenging times. As we look at where we're at, you know, obviously September for me personally has always been a sense of renewal. It's awesome to see all of our young people heading back to school, the sense of vibrancy, the sense of energy in our university district. Although I do condone unsanctioned events, and I do condone, you know, the gatherings that have been happening over the weekend, I want to reassure the board that we have a significant back to school road safety plan. Our neighborhood policing, our road safety team, our traffic team are out in every school zone, ensuring the safety of our most precious cargo, our children. We have a safe semester return that has been operating for the last 2 weeks. And yes, we're working very closely with all of our post-secondary institutions. And I do want to recognize the strong sense of response from President McCatchy at WLU for a strong partnership with our police service in actually condoning the recent actions and the recent unsanctioned events. We'll continue to monitor that. Most recently, we were happy to welcome with Dr. Schnarr 26 new recruits in our first badge ceremony in over 18 months. And thanks to Mayor Verbanovic and the City of Kitchener for hosting us at the market. It was a fitting tribute to welcome 26 incredible recruits. Not only are they homegrown locally, but we welcome from Kenya, from Nigeria, from Trinidad Tobago, and 2 from Scotland to our organization as new Canadians. And the reflection and the caliber of those individuals. I know that Dr. Schnarr was very much excited as a number of Wilfrid Laurier University graduates were represented. There was a couple of University Guelph, which sort of, you know, represented my alma mater and made me happy, but the talent and the work of our recruiting team, Sergeant Marco Jardim and our recruiting unit, simply outstanding. And we look forward to post-pandemic celebrating those sessions with our community. I would be remiss if I didn't recognize the challenges of violent crime. I would be remiss if I didn't recognize that we have a lot of work to do locally in addressing violent crime. I can assure you that Deputy Hilton and her team is working very hard to tackle gun crime in particular. Staff Superintendent Goodman's working very hard to look at different transitions around how we deal with mental health. And although the Special Investigation Unit Act prohibits me from speaking specifically to the most recent interaction, I will tell you that any time that we discharge use of force of a grievous and serious bodily harm nature, it's pause for all of us to reflect on the systems within our community. How did this transpire? Why did it transpire? We must allow the Special Investigation Unit to fulfill its mandate, but I want to reassure the board and our community that we'll also continue to review and look at all the different processes as we continue to advance. Of course, you know, when we look at our human resource dashboard, as Ms. Hand alluded, our recruiting team has been busy. We're actually slightly above complement on the uniform side, below complement on the civilian side, which is leading to a positive variance right now, one that we're working towards. But I want to set the prelude as we look to October. We will be coming to the Police Services Board with the first iteration of the 2022 operation and capital budget, providing the board with a number of scenarios. As we look at the current climate of policing, we look at what's happening within our region and ensuring that we present a budget that not only continues to deal with the issues that we're facing presently, but looks to future investment as to ensure prevention and how we manage those pieces. We'll also be reporting on our path forward, a lot of work that we've been doing as an organization as we continue through this process. We'll also be celebrating 2 awards. We have Staff Sergeant Eric Boynton, who's been recognized by the International Association of Chiefs of Police for 40 under 40, which is amazing. I'm not even sure if he's 30, but congratulations, and we'll recognize Eric. We'll also recognize Sergeant Kelly Preble, who's done a significant amount of work and is the recipient of a provincial leader or national leadership award through Blue Line magazine, which is a police professional magazine. And we're very proud of the work of Kelly. And in particular, I know that Mayor Shantz will take some pride in this because she's done a significant amount of work in our rural communities. There's lots happening. There's lots of things happening in a complex world, a complex society. And often your police service is in the middle of it. Our members are in the middle of it. I want to remind the board and our community that our members are human. They're parents, their sons, their daughters, their partners, their spouses. And in this complex world, they're ever evolving and subjected to all kinds of different things. But every single day, they continue to come to work and provide community service, community leadership, and they do it with significant professionalism and empathy. We're human, we make mistakes, but I want to reassure you that all of the work that we're doing is continued and focused on one mission, and that is to be the most progressive police service in Ontario and in Canada. And I think we're well on our way to fulfilling that mission. And more importantly, we're on that continued mission of helping people. I want to add, and I want to recognize our executive wing and Ms. Sherry Greeno and the executive team, because it is back to school week, and I'll end on this note. A number of years ago, we had an outreach from Family and Children's Services that said, Chief, we have a number of young people that are finding themselves in a challenging position and they can't go back to school with a backpack, a lunch bag, and some new clothes. Are you willing to help us out? We probably need, 50 to 200. Can you lend a hand? And we mobilized our organization and we were able to lend a hand. And since then, this has become an annual tradition of helping many different agencies that reach out. And in fact, before we even start the program, agencies are reaching out. Naturally, during the pandemic, our service and our organization has had the benefit. We've continued to work, albeit our families have suffered, like every other family, around the wellness and the impact of the pandemic. But we've continued to be racially and with grace employed as public servants. And we made a call to our organization. We made a call to our corporate partners, our chambers, our business folks. And this year, very excited to announce that more than 2,500 young people across our community have gone back to school with a little swagger, a new backpack, a new lunch bag, some school supplies, and a gift card to help them with some new digs and some new kicks. And that is thanks to all of our members. There was challenges at divisions. There was interdivisional and interbranch rivalries. And at the heart of that, Ms. Sherry Greeno pounding the doors, trying to get support and help. And I had the pleasure last week with many of our frontline members to attend different communities. And the amount of love, the amount of thank yous was immense. And so with that, my monthly report and our annual report all mixed in, subject to questions. I'm very excited for the final quarter of 2021. We've got a strong leadership team. We're very grateful for the wisdom of our police services board. And I still believe that the best is yet to come as we roll through the challenges of 2021 and the opportunities that the current pandemic and social climate presents. So again, thanks so much and happy September.
Very inspirational and full of so much good information. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, you left us all speechless, Chief. I really appreciate the report and the overview. It was very informative, and really did appreciate your comments on President McClatchy and Laurier responding to the unsanctioned events and how we work with the community to make sure that peace and order and public safety is always safeguarded. And I know that that comes with a very vibrant partnership with the university, with the city of Waterloo, as well as police services. So thank you for that. I'm sure we'll go forward with a safe and healthy school year starting in September. I see no other questions or comments. Is there any new business? Any future agenda items? Information items? I just want to take a moment and thank Holly Kent, who is here from Waterloo Regional Clerk's Office, to help us do this live streaming. I think this is a very important ability for the public to hear and find out what's going on at the Police Services Board. So thank you, Holly. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Karen, seconded by Carl. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Once we have adjourned, members of the media are welcome to log on to Zoom. I think lots of you are in the room, but if you're not, please log on. The